Following the recent announcement of a collaboration between Dead by Daylight and Assassin's Creed, yes, they're somehow still making those, I've seen a resurfacing of the term Fortniteification in regard to DBD. While I know people like to go banger hunting on Twitter, I have some fairly strong feelings about this, and I'm not sure the general public is getting this one right. So, before getting into my thoughts, I would like to get into what the term Fortniteification means to me, because I feel like the definition could somewhat vary from person to person, and that may be where the disagreement is coming from. To me, a game is undergoing what we might call Fortniteification when it begins to trade an established identity for a new one that emphasizes a more lighthearted aesthetic, more forceful monetization tactics, and a heavy reliance on popular licenses from film, television, video games, music, or general celebrity or pop culture. A great example of this is the Call of Duty series. Back when I was growing up 10,000 years ago, COD was famous for epic single-player campaigns and satisfying FPS multiplayer. Zombies was meant to be eerie, the campaigns were mostly earnest, if greatly dramatized, depictions of warfare, and the multiplayer was a playground where real-life militaries would duke it out in death matches, King of the Hill battles, search and destroy special missions, and other fairly tame game modes by the standards of what we see today. These days, though, COD has completely changed. To me, the newer campaigns seem to be passable, but really secondary. They're not the main focus anymore. Zombies jumped the shark long ago, as any element of fear has been replaced with silly and over-the-top arcade mechanics that more or less do away completely with the atmosphere ushered in by the iconic Nacht der Untoten. And then you have the multiplayer, which is where we find the clearest case of Fortniteification. It wasn't enough to do away with factions like the Spetsnaz or the NVA. They took it even further and have now added playable military icons such as Nicki Minaj, Cody Rhodes, and just recently, Seth Rogen. The monetization is through the roof with all of the modern tricks and mechanics, the visual aesthetic is saturated and vibrant, and the series' original tone is just completely gone. More than probably any series out there, Call of Duty has undergone serious Fortniteification in an effort to stay relevant. But can the same be said about Dead by Daylight? To get to the bottom of this question, I think there are three important categories that need to be considered. Those being monetization, licensed characters, and the game's general aesthetic. Let's start with the monetization. When we look at DBD's monetization tactics, there are definitely pros and cons to be found. I really like how they handle cosmetics, where a frequent player can use iridescent shards to buy cosmetics for non-licensed characters. This allows players to snap up the latest skin for their favorite survivor or killer, which is definitely appreciated. I like that they don't force your hand to just whip out the credit card for those. I do find myself wishing that it was the case where either the skins would be cheaper or where eerie shards are gained at a quicker rate, but this is a mostly okay feature for the time being. Extending even beyond that, players can use shards to unlock every new character that isn't hidden behind a licensing paywall, which does make sense, actually. It would be cool to be able to get Pyramid Head or Chucky for free, but I completely understand why they can't really do that from a business perspective. Also, new chapters are fairly affordable when compared to a lot of what the competition is offering. To be able to get the entire Alien chapter for 12 USD is pretty reasonable, especially when looking at gacha games like the now mostly dead AFK Arena that charge $15 for new licensed champions. Even the great boogeyman in question, Fortnite, charges something like $20 just to play as Jar Jar Binks, so the value proposition isn't all that bad for Dead by Daylight. But that's about all the nice things I have to say regarding DBD's monetization. For a game that used to lack any in-game purchases outside of new chapters, it's a little jarring to load in today and see so many of gaming's less admirable monetization tactics present. The game has multiple currency systems. It has FOMO-inducing battle passes with a paid track in case a person wants to get all of the coolest new gear, and regular cosmetics that constantly encourage the player to fork over cash, and if you've run out of eerie shards, which you will do pretty quickly, oh well, I guess you could just use some real-world money on it. Even the licensed chapters, which I've already admitted are not too expensive, are becoming a bit of a problem. With the release of Five Nights at Freddy's, or the chapter that's coming out for that, 4 of the last 5 killers will now be licensed. If a person is new to DBD and wants to own all of the mainline content, and I'm excluding skins, battle passes, and anything else superfluous here, they're going to have to shell out serious money to own every killer, survivor, and perk. There would have been a time where I would have given Dead by Daylight high marks for their monetization practices, but I think it's fair to say that these days, the game has gotten fairly aggressive with it, and that's something that really isn't helped out by the terrible Shrine of Secrets mechanic, which the community sometimes uses to justify these tactics, but I'm just not buying it. I don't think it negates the harm done by these practices. When it comes to monetization, I think it's fair to say that DBD has emulated Fortnite to some extent, but I feel like that's only part of the picture. DBD has relied on licenses since the launch of the Halloween chapter back in 2016. So it's hard to say that they took this from Fortnite. For the battle passes, the skins, the currency systems, all that though, I think they definitely did take some inspiration. I think that's a fair criticism to make, or at least an observation to make. I mentioned a more lighthearted aesthetic earlier, so let's talk about the aesthetic now. This is another area where DBD has a mixed track record, but I generally think they've done all right here. I don't mind things like the updated character portraits or small things like that, but there have been some downsides to the game updating its graphical presentation. Wacky cosmetics are here to stay, it would seem, and sometimes it is jarring to log into the slasher simulator, the murder simulator, all that, and see characters dressed in neon clothing and swimsuits and just generally silly outfits. There's a fine line to walk with these types of things, and sometimes it does feel like Dead by Daylight goes too far from its original intent. Speaking of which, let's talk about the maps here, because I think that's a big one to mention. There was a time when maps were dark, grimy, and generally unpleasant to look at. To me, this really boosted the game's presentation, as the nastier looking maps really made you feel like you were caught in a hellscape created from the memory of a malevolent deity. The entity creates these realms from what it knows of Earth, so it made sense that they looked generally familiar while also being distinctly off. I actually thought that was a really, really nice feature. Nowadays, though, the maps look like real-world locations. They have realistic-looking buildings, accurate foliage, and a general aesthetic that would make a person say, yeah, that could exist in our world, without ever giving off that eerie feeling that the game used to be so good at creating. While we're here, I'd like to mention a personal pet peeve of mine that probably doesn't matter if all things are being, equal, but to me, it's strange that a game called Dead by Daylight, daylight being the operative word here, features several daytime maps now, like the Garden of Joy, the Forsaken Boneyard, the Dead Dog Saloon, Coldwind Farms maps, and the Ormond Realm. It just feels somewhat counterintuitive for a game that's all about the things that go bump in the night to have so many maps featuring Mr. Sun front and center. It's strange to me. This was all a part of Behavior's plan to beautify the game, which has, like so many of the company's initiatives, produced mixed results. I don't mind that the characters are looking a little better these days, and I like some of the new animations a lot. But I'd be lying if I said that I was a fan of just how pretty the entity's realm has become. In updating the graphics, the devs actually managed to make the maps less immersive, which I count as a real shame. Even so, I feel like it's hard to argue that this is just, it's just another case of Fortniteification. The game certainly looks prettier, nobody's denying that, but the base graphics are still dark, unsaturated, and gritty. Some damage has been done, but it's mostly pretty easy to ignore if you're not an old curmudgeon like me, so I won't count this category against them. Let's be honest though, the surest sign of Fortniteification tends to be found in the licenses that a live service game chooses to take on. If COD had updated the graphics, the gameplay, the game modes, and nearly everything else, but left the operatives as legitimate military types, people would be a lot more forgiving of the game's transformation. Thankfully, for Dead by Daylight, this is where I feel like they've stayed very true to the original vision this game set out with. Just take a moment and look at the licensed content that this game has added over the years. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Saw, Alien, Child's Play, Evil Dead, Silent Hill, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Resident Evil, Left 4 Dead. All of these are legitimate horror properties that 100% belong in a game like DBD. If we look at upcoming content like FNAF and Walking Dead, which is almost certainly coming soon, it's clear that the devs are keeping to the game's roots fairly lovingly. There have been some rare oddities over the years. Rainbow Six Siege, to me, was a miss. Nick Cage was a very surprising addition. The For Honor collab was just a giant nothing burger. The use of anime properties like Attack on Titan and Tokyo Ghoul will always ruffle the feathers of some players. And everything about Hooked on You was just unbelievably boring and trite. I didn't like it at all. but these are excusable in light of the consistency they've shown in getting licenses that actually fit the game and fit the property they're trying to establish. This isn't a game where you can play as Sabrina Carpenter. It's a horror game, so you get cosmetics for Iron Maiden and Slipknot, which fits. I can't find celebrities like Shohei Ohtani or Marshmello here, but I do see horror bona fides like Bruce Campbell. There hasn't been room for villains like, Thanos here, because behavior has been more focused on adding characters like Vecna, the evil, spooky lich from Dungeons & Dragons. When it comes to licenses, we all have some we think fit more than others, but the devs have yet to include anything too egregious. Again, I think the Rainbow Six cosmetics were the game's nadir to this point, as that license really has nothing to do with DBD or horror in general, but outside of that, Behavior has done a great job of staying focused and giving the players what they want. On this point, I think we can comfortably say the game has yet to reach thorough Fortniteification. Players may complain about things like the Assassin's Creed collab, but my expectation is that it will play out similarly to the For Honor collaboration. The other game, being Assassin's Creed this time, will get a time-restricted mission or a game mode related to DBD, and given that this game is set in Japan, it's probably related to the Oni. Maybe Yui makes an appearance, I don't know. Probably not though, it's probably just the Oni. And while they get that, the king of horror ASIMs will only go so far as to add some charms or maybe even a cosmetic or two. Really, to me, that's not the grave error that some are making it out to be. So in conclusion, no, I don't think that Dead by Daylight has sold its soul in the name of Fortniteification. To this point, I think the game is doing a fairly respectable job from an aesthetic and licensing standpoint. Really, the monetization is the only thing I hold against them, and there are way more games than just Fortnite that could be blamed for that, so I don't even think that's clear-cut evidence. But overall, those are just my thoughts on this. I just want to make a quick little video talking about it because I feel like every few months we get this thing coming out like, oh man, DBD really wants to be Fortnite, huh? And I just kind of wanted to push back against that because I think it's only fair to remain as neutral as possible. So if they do something I don't like, I want to call it out. But if they're doing something I look at and I think it's going well, I don't want to be sitting back on the sidelines and just staying silent while I think they're being unfairly attacked for something. So those are my thoughts on that. But as always, I am very curious to hear what you think. Do you think that they have gone too far already? Or where is the line? Do you want emotes? Do you want, I don't know, crazy things like you'd see in Fortnite? I mean, really out there collabs. I don't know where the line is necessarily. It's kind of one of those, I think we'll know it when we see it. I don't think it's been reached yet, but I want to hear from you. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are. And until the next one, I've been Das Food. Bye, friends.
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't